What's up, everyone? Facebook gives you this little 3,
I'm
2,
looking
1.
at this my wild hair.
Looks good, doesn't it? The wilder, the better. The environment is having its intended effect. It always starts with the hair. So as promised, we're saying hi, checking in. We have some stuff we'd like to share. We have just concluded about a 30-minute, very intense downpour of rain, which was beautiful.
Refreshing and life-giving. Really cool.
Very life-giving.
Because we've been here, it's sort of the rainy season, not the rainiest of the rainy, but rainy season here. It really hasn't rained that much. Just the first day we got here, basically, it was kind of like a lot of rain, but yeah, you could just feel it in the air. It's wet and fertile. It's great.
Amazing.
It's really great.
If you saw pictures we shared yesterday in the community, if you're not a member of the Ownstream community, please join us there. But we put some pictures up from we just kind of went out of the house and went on a little walk, and it was just amazing. So beautiful. I mean, pictures fail. They so don't do it justice. But anyway, those were posted yesterday. Hopefully you'll check those out. But yeah, we wanted to talk. As you know, we've been on the move a lot, and as we've been moving so much, a lot of creative ideas have surfaced. And but because we've been constantly kind of dealing with logistics and going here and going there and finding a place or being in the van or going up into the mountains where there's no Wi-Fi or whatever it may be, we haven't been able to really see any of these things through, which has actually been really kind of wonderful because it's really allowed things to germinate and kind of turn into what they need to turn into. And now that we've been here for over a week, it suddenly now seems very relevant to start to get into these and see what we can turn these visions into in terms of an offering or a way to connect with others.
Yeah, and actually I think that one of the reasons we've had a lot of creative inspirations over the past handful of months, but actually it's been that things are changing really rapidly for us in terms of what feels authentic, in terms of how we want to be of service and what feels relevant and what feels effective, I think. And so even though we've had a lot of ideas kind of germinating, there's a lot of reasons in addition to our movement, I think, that we haven't taken action on any of these. And it's because, and we'll talk about this, I think, in the context of the projects we're thinking about, is we really wanted to kind of put out where we are right now with these and just like hear the feedback of this awesome community. Because it doesn't really, we were in Costa Rica in January through March, and we had plans
last year.
Oh yeah, this past year, yeah. And when we got back to California, we like had plans for something we were going to create, and we've been we've just been doing a lot of work on how we want to be a service and like tuning into that, doing a lot of meditation. We're in a leadership group that we're working with. We have community that we're working with, and just kind of like really tuning into what feels the most authentic in terms of our calling and how to be a service to others. And so that just has been like rapidly evolving. And even as we discuss the projects we're going to talk about, or that are kind of just little seedlings, like even those, like they're just every day we're kind of like, well, maybe it would look like this, or this would be more effective, or this. And it's all about what resonates and what feels exciting that we think is the guidepost to what would be the most effective service that we can get. So all the old rules we had about, like, for example, we'll talk about a program we've been thinking about for a long time that keeps changing in our minds about what, in our resonance about what could be most effective. And, there's a lot of like old things that we thought about in terms of marketing things that Stephen has learned in the past, or, things like that just don't, they don't resonate anymore in terms of like what would be the most effective. And so it's really about tuning in, feeling our excitement, feeling what like feels like inspiration and not kind of mind. So one of the things was that we put the podcast on hold for August. And what happened when we got back to California is we just, after a year, basically a year and a quarter,
over a year
of being like really excited about the podcast, like super excited, we started to feel like this isn't 100% resonant the way we were doing it anymore. Just a few of the conversations we had, we thought, we felt a little flat, and we felt like we weren't sure about both like the content of the podcast and the format of the podcast being the platform, being the what we wanted to be sharing. And so we recorded a few really awesome episodes right before we decided to put it on pause. And we knew we were coming here August 1st to Costa Rica, and so we wanted to really give the time to take a pause and allow for not just continuing because we'd built momentum on that, but really like taking a step back and seeing, is this the most effective content? Is this the most effective format that we could be delivering a message that we want to be delivering?
It seems like that we have kind of two facets to our business, if you will. One is the platform, one is the coaching, and both areas are very much under review and development and under construction. And it felt like the stories we were telling, as Teresa mentioned, the audio format might not be the best way to tell that story. And so one idea that we had that kind of emerged from contemplating a better vehicle, if you will, or a better form for communicating these ideas that we were uncovering over and over by these pioneers, these wonderful people doing things differently, were short little movies about each of these folks, 20 minutes or so. Portraits of people kind of living in an entirely new way, visuals. You could see it, you could almost touch it, you could feel it more deeply. And that was really, really exciting to us, still is very exciting to us. And here in Costa Rica, there's so many people doing that. I mean, the people who own this house that were just here a little while ago,
they're amazing.
They were bringing little saplings, and we all went down to the garden and planted them, just having your hands in the dirt. It's like really, really kind of amazing. And you've lived in the city for 20 years, and anyway, but yeah, so like just capturing these in like 15 to 20 minute videos that we could release as a series, like it was maybe 6 at a time or something like that, every 3 months or something. I don't know, but visual, capturing these stories in a visual way. And people who have not only kind of recreated life anew outside of the mainstream kind of matrix paradigm way of life, but people who, because of a spiritual awakening, have done that. We've talked to a lot of people who've had really interesting, wonderful stories, but without that kind of piece in there about a profound spiritual awakening, the realization that who I am is something far greater than a person. Without that piece in place, it always felt kind of incomplete or flat or not interesting to us. So that part, we definitely, whatever the platform becomes going forward, whether the podcast continues or becomes these portraits, if you will, that piece will be in place for sure. So that is like probably the most immediate thing. And
it's interesting because Stephen had the inspiration when we first started Ownstream that we should be doing video, and not a podcast, and he even shot one with a friend of ours. Thank you, Maria. It's so
Thanks,
good to
Maria.
see you. And he had an inspiration. We even shot one with a friend of ours in Encinitas, and it was great, actually, a little different from what we ended up focusing on the podcast. But then we, Stephen had experience podcasting. It was just something technically we were able to kind of like jump out of the gate and be able to do. And what an amazing time we've had doing that. And what we really want to focus on is like giving people an experience, So we felt like with the podcast, the story we're trying to tell is somebody who believed in one way of living, one way of believing about themselves in life that stopped resonating, that felt confining, that didn't feel free, that didn't feel resonant with their true path, and then a turning point, and then a full expression of some great, often a great calling, a great freedom lifestyle, like something that emerged. It was a total shift, and our hope with those stories has been to help people identify with both sides of that, that like the pain, and then also like that the possibility that they know there's this change that can happen. And so like Stephen said, the stories that became the most interesting to us were really the ones that had a profound spiritual awakening involved, because really that forms the rest of the story. The limitless nature of it, the freedom, the faith, the power in it is really informed by that. And I think stories that don't necessarily have that are always as full of those kind of like that trust and faith and power the story that we really want to be sharing with people. But we almost filmed one of these actually before we left the States, and it would have been amazing.
Yeah, we went all the way to Sedona, and it was right. We were like the next day we were going to do it, and it just didn't feel right for various reasons. Although the person we were going to feature is wonderful, and would fit into this format. I think it was just not the right time, which was fine because it wasn't the right time for us either, because the not doing it has turned into a really good thing. Although it's still sitting there as something for us to take on. But yeah, we went to Sedona. We're about to do it, and we didn't do it. But that's kind of that's as we're talking about it, it just feels exciting. Like I'm already imagining us over at the Brad and Nikki's house, like doing one of them, because it would be fucking amazing. I'm telling you, like you would be so. It's mesmerizing what they've created here. It's extraordinary,
and it's really to show that there is such a different way to live. And specifically, we've been kind of tentatively calling these portraits for a new Earth, because what we're doing here in Costa Rica, part of our calling is about establishing a new Earth and a new way to live that's informed by our mutual knowing of being the creator and being able to create this Earth in a way that's harmonious and loving and full of power. And so anyway, we see a lot of that happening here in the mountains of Costa Rica, and Brad and Nikki are such a great example. They are like creators through and through every second.
So it would almost sort of feel like a kind of a first season could be Costa Rica, if you will. Because there's so many diverse, interesting things happening here. And really, this feels like a place where people have come to be restored to our rightful, if you will, place as creators in harmony with nature. Like the people around here, they have their hands in the dirt, they're growing food, they're like intimately connected with the rhythms of the world and constantly creating. It's wonderful.
Art and healing and food,
everything,
and like all kinds of things.
Everything, it's all happening.
There's little pockets everywhere you go. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, it's neat. So that's kind of like the first. That would be kind of like the Ownstream podcast platform, if you look at that as just an audience we've assembled and a voice that we've created. These video projects would be the next level, and sort of past that, or maybe parallel to that, is a broader documentary. Also speaking to this topic, but more as a full-length, feature-length, kind of 90-minute, if you will, film. And again, like as Teresa talked about, like really feeling into the experience we're giving people, which is something that will be a theme throughout all these things we discussed today and going forward for us. We feel like to really impact people, to really help people transform their lives, to help seed, if you will, this new Earth, that giving people an experience is what's the key. There's so much content, there's so much helpful information, there's so much wonderful material flowing, but can we kind of upgrade the form with which things are delivered to people who want and need this information? Can we upgrade that whole process? So it's not just us talking at folks on Skype or through a podcast, but it's more than that. So we're thinking about all the time, like how can we create experiences for people that will, by their nature, create a transformation? Because just even being here in this type of environment, we're in such a natural, lush place, like it activates a whole different part of self. Like you just feel so much more alive and more in harmony, and just everything sort of just changes if you allow yourself to be open to the influences here. And so we're kind of always thinking about how can we serve people, how can we upgrade this planet, if you will, how can we kind of move people past all these old paradigms with more than just the information, with more than just like, hey, you should do this. So moving things into a visual format seems like kind of upgrading that experience. And obviously a documentary kind of would carry that forward even more. I think people are really, really excited by full-length films, and really so many groundbreaking films have come out that have transformed our life, whether it's Forks Over Knives or The Truth About Cancer, pointing to our most recent podcast guest, Ty Bollinger. I think that is something that what we're seeing, the recreation of our society sort of feels like it really wants a film about it, or at least a series of portraits that can kind of track this development so that people can tap into that and see how these lives are being regenerated and do it themselves and feel the inspiration, see the inspiration, experience that inspiration directly.
Yeah, and I think as we go through these projects, I'll talk about the next one, I think we'll hear that they're more and more experiential. So even a film is still like, a transmission, sort of a consumption, right? Like you're transmitting information that is being then consumed. There's less interaction involved in that. So the next thing that one thing we've been focusing on for a while is a program to release to help people exit the matrix. And so this, I think, is the project we've tossed around the most, although the portraits we have, and Dr. Mary talked a lot about too, but specifically, we started out thinking about this sort of in a very traditional coaching format, which would be like a 3-month program, I don't know how long. And we have, for a long time, from work with our coaching clients, we have an idea of where we want to take people and what might be involved in that, and we've started to map it out and all that, but then recently we've just more and more have just felt that it might be a little bit stale to just kind of deliver content. And every time we've worked with clients too, it's been highly experiential. We're always sending people out on missions, actions, like tons of things that they have to do. But now we're looking at an Exit the Matrix program. And if you know our work at all, you might know that we've released an ebook on this topic, Exiting the Matrix, which is really about a set of tools, a set of practices to implement that have worked for us to help get off the mainstream program and really listen to your highest self. Those are what all those strategies are about, whether it's changing your inputs, your news feeds, to developing a meditation practice, how you meditate, to getting into nature and others. So really it's about putting this all together in a pathway to get people to disconnect from the mainstream program and tune into your own stream program, as we call it, and move from there. And so we have a really great idea of what this would look like, but we want it to be experiential. We don't want to just be kind of like delivering information. We really want, because you change through experience. You only change through your own experience, So really, that's what we're playing with now at this program, is what would it look like A to Z, but also like how can we make this like really epic, really experiential, exciting, and adventure, no holding back, and really having people only join if they know that they want to like dramatically change their lives, that there is no going back. Possibly culminating in in-person adventure here in Costa Rica or elsewhere in the world. It may not be here, but definitely want to have a retreat, but also more than a retreat, like the coaching and the retreats, more than that, we want to create something that is highly experiential in nature, to catalyze that Exit the Matrix full stop change.
Yeah, yeah, and having people come here seems like a kind of a logical kind of final step, because organizing people into their own community, their own pack, their own tribe, I think would be another additional thing that would help keep the momentum going as people make all these changes, to kind of put them in a tribe that can then help everybody going forward once the actual program itself ends. And then kind of in keeping with this experiential theme, like this Exit the Matrix program, I think it'd be about 90 days. And then another kind of similar program what we're loosely calling Epic Awakenings, which would be for like one person or maybe a small group of say 2 or 3 that would want to do this thing together. And the Epic Awakenings program would be highly experiential, the kind of thing where it'd be a knock on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and somebody comes in there, and that this is going to happen. You just don't know exactly when, but it's going to happen. Somebody comes in, helps you pack your clothes, and you get in a limousine, and you go to the airport, and you're on a plane. And the next week of your life is this unbelievable kind of James Bond-ish type adventure, where all along the way you have these amazing experiences and like life-changing experiences, but where we also kind of, through research, kind of understand, if you will, maybe the triggers that need to be fired or the changes that could be made. And we'll do things, we'll create the conditions for that to happen, and then the conditions on the other side for healing, transformation, and release to occur. And some of you may know this, but I had a long performing arts history, and Teresa and I, although I was kind of the figurehead for this organization, I think we had both of our hearts were very much in this endeavor back in Brooklyn, the Beat Festival. One of the projects we did, which you can look up, was we worked with this group called Odyssey Works. And what they would do was they would pick a person, they would open up applications, and a bunch of people would apply, knowing that what they were signing up for was something that was completely unknown. They would be taken on a full-day adventure that would be created such that a person can have a very deep and profound experience of themselves, perhaps seeing a part of themselves they had not seen before. And these were wildly adventurous, really interesting. You know, in our case, we had a bunch of people, volunteers, descend upon a park in Brooklyn where this person was, and they did this whole kind of scene around this person. It was like a flash mob that happened just for him. And at the end of the day, like it took him weeks to process this, if you will. And so the transformation that happened for him was like a laser-like and extraordinarily deep and lasting. And one thing that happens a lot with typical kind of coaching modules is that, you know, say you have 20 or 30 people sign up, and I've done this before in another business, and maybe 1 or 2 people really see it through, they really commit, and everybody else sort of has a good experience, and maybe a couple are like never kind of get into it for whatever reason. But in this case, you could go really deep with someone and create something profound and completely life-changing. You could also, I think, do that for, say, 2 or 3 people that were very close, like lifelong friends or siblings or partners and that sort of thing.
Family.
So these would be, you know, for hire type of experiences, which we would create for the person. We would interview everybody they'd ever known, pretty much, you know, within reason, and really understand the architecture of this person, how they've created their life, who they really are, and kind of create an experience for them to see themselves, maybe all aspects, in particular their calling and the triggers or the roadblocks that might be preventing that calling from emerging more and more fully expressed. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. We want to take elements of that and put it into, you know, a program, say for 20 or 30 people, so that they can have a highly accelerated, highly intense, very deep and profound experience too. But these epic awakenings would be for, say, one person who just was like, I want the whole thing. I'm up for a really crazy adventure. Come get me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm ready. That sort of thing. So these are the types of things we're mulling over.
It's definitely the kind of thing that we would, like Steven said, want to build into something like an Exit the Matrix program too, because the idea of like working with people for 90 days or like getting to know a group, creating a group field, and knowing enough about a person that you could create really specific adventures, challenges, missions, rituals that would be very specific to that person's you know, childhood wounds / lasting triggers / like fears that cannot be overcome. We have a lot of ideas about how we might do that. We were just kind of riffing on a few people that we know, for example, and like or on ourselves and what we might design for each other if we were to do something like this. And so it's really exciting. And what Odyssey Works did, like this idea of, you know, you interview the closest people in the person's life. You do a detailed history of their life, of the things they're holding on to. You talk to their therapist, you know, whatever. You talk to like every person that knows this person, and they have to be signing up for, you know, being ready for anything. But that even as you were talking about it, I'm just like super excited about that.
Oh yeah,
like,
it's so cool. I mean,
like, so it'd be so fun to do that.
I think as people who are thinking about how to help, how to serve, how can we really, really facilitate transformation? How can we unlock people? Experience, I think, should become like the new direction, the new terrain of exploration, because there's enough content, but to take content into to really allow it to sink into a person, to really get it into their bones, how to take that content and turn it into experiences, and everything from like, you know, meditate for 20 minutes a day. That's a great experiential practice, to other more daring, if you will, kind of more risky, quote unquote, kind of missions or endeavors. And also, like, one thing just I'll throw in here at the end is the notion of ritual or ceremony originally was to do this. It was to kind of impart certain teachings on a person that bypass the mind, which can hijack everything and distort it and turn it into something it isn't, but a more direct experience through a ritual, through a ceremony, through something created by somebody who's really clear on what's happening. That can accelerate and deepen, profoundly deepen the experience and the learning and the transformation. So for what it's worth, I think if people are tuning into this and interested in how to help, how to serve, I I think having a conversation around how to design experiences for people so that things can occur to them, as opposed to just telling them something, is a big, big step forward.
Yeah. A big extension of that is something that Stephen feels like is being downloaded to him, so I want him to talk about it. But we've been discussing this project called The Great Awakening. And it really builds on, like, really beautifully, you know, in your life where, like, some pieces of your life may not seem to make sense, and life kind of feels like this sometimes, and you don't know, like, where it's going. When Stephen, you know, when we first created the Beat Festival in New York, it was sort of like that, like all these odds and end parts of his life, like, started to become relevant, whether it was like office managing or I don't know, just like all these very random things became relevant, you know. And I do believe life is like that, like, you know, sometimes I wonder, like, why did I go to law school? But like, but no, there's been countless ways that are not straightforward about why things become relevant and why they come back later. And often we call these things coincidences, but to me, they're like just keys that you're on the path of your life.
Graceful design.
To be creating. So Stephen's now receiving these sort of like downloads about an experiential theater piece, and that was like the heart of the Beat Festival. In the end, were like these really amazing experiential pieces, and we went to a few others that were big in New York at the time that we were there. But again, this question about how do you wake somebody up in a profound and irrevocable way, you know, like we both have had long spiritual paths, and the past couple of years have been very accelerating, very, very, very. And so now, like, that question of like how do you get somebody that experience, and faster, because the planet is changing. We don't need to be on the path or like learning to meditate for 20 years. Like, you could do this more profoundly. And so now Stephen's been having these downloads. We've been kind of co-creating this idea, bouncing back and forth of like what an awakening experiential theater piece might look like.
Yeah, if you're interested in just this general idea about what an experiential theater piece is, the premier one, at least in New York City, is called Sleep No More. And we went to it, and it's just the coolest thing. I mean, it's the coolest thing. It's so amazing. And there's another one actually even better that's not as kind of a mainstream popular hit, but it's called Then She Fell. We actually worked with the group who created Then She Fell in the Beat Festival itself. But imagine, you know, the traditional way of having a theatrical experience or dance or opera or whatever is, you know, you assemble an audience, put them in chairs, create a platform, a stage, and something happens on that stage, and you watch. There's an exchange between the audience and what appears on the stage. Experiential theater, or immersive, is when people are kind of cut loose in an environment where something is taking place, a story is unfolding, an action is occurring, and you're allowed some sense of authorship or autonomy over your experience. And Sleep No More is a great example, because when you get there, the first thing they give you is a mask. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets the same mask, and you're rendered anonymous. And the freedom that you feel when you're cut loose into this environment is really special. And so basically Sleep No More is they're telling the story of Macbeth throughout this old abandoned, it was a hotel on the west side of Manhattan in Chelsea. And, you know, 400 or 500 people go through at a time, and it's just super sexy. It's very adventurous. It's extremely cutting edge. It is so fun and lush and mysterious, and the production value is very high, and it's amazing. I mean, it's so art is kind of moving in this direction, more and more experiential, primarily because I think a lot of artists and creators are tired of creating something just purely for consumption or purely to be digested or observed. And I think people correspondingly want to be immersed in something. They want to experience something. Think about kind of a haunted house when you were a kid. You know, like, ooh, how exciting that was. And me, I love to create the haunted house. I remember we did one at this church I was in once, and like, it was so fun to create the haunted house. So anyway, just to clarify what downloads means, like I keep seeing these visions or images of this piece, and I'm calling it loosely right now The Great Awakening, but it's basically where a group of people, an audience, if you will, can enter into an environment where we sort of show them directly, like with them in it, how the program of the mainstream kind of the mainstream, the matrix, if you will, is installed. and how that's been created, how that's been developed, how that's been built over, say, the last 100 or so years or more. All kinds of possible vignettes could be created there that people could freely enter and leave, whether that's the creation of the Federal Reserve or, I don't want to get too specific, but where you could see how this structure was put in place to keep people in a very confined type of life that I think more and more people are waking up to now and feel like they can emerge out of. So there's that part. That would be sort of part one. And then part two would be you bring them into an environment that's created along the lines of the conversation we've been having in the podcast and in the videos that we've been sharing about, but what we would loosely call like a new earth or an ascended environment where all these vignettes could be created off of that. But just to give some specifics, to give some clarity as to what this would look like. When you enter into the piece, for example, you would go along, say, a conveyor belt, and behind a very long kind of glassed-in casing of a scene, you would see a person being born. You'd see that baby be given like tons of vaccines. You'd see that baby fed all kinds of toxic food. You'd see that baby turn into a child, go off to school, and be told all these rules, and this is what you're supposed to do. And you would just see their life get smaller and smaller and smaller until the very end of it, they would come out, with one very narrow view of what their world could be. Maybe it's become a lawyer, become a business person, or whatever it may be. So we would kind of dramatize that life path, and I think most people would be able to identify with that. And then on the other side, kind of imagine like entering into like an ascended environment, very different energy, very different lighting, feeling. People kind of feel different there, the actors, if you will, who are creating these various vignettes. And then you would see the life cycle unfold from there. Maybe a child has like a very natural birth and is held close to its mother, and the father is there and the family is there. Then this child is kind of nourished through childhood and helped to be grown, and then just told to, what's exciting to you, what do you want to do, what feels like it just wants to be expressed through you. And this sort of life path unfold. So you would see a very distinct, contrasting one or another. You would be able to feel both of those very differently, and then kind of be cut loose in an environment where all sorts of other things are taking place, where people could have very intimate encounters with actors. You could kind of step into, say, a holographic presentation of a spiritual teacher kind of giving a satsang, or you could even kind of, one thing I keep wanting people to see, and I want to create some sort of experiential way of sharing this, is like basically what science now knows and what spiritual teachers have been teaching us for millennia is that this whole experience is a projection of consciousness. This actually doesn't exist as matter per se, but it's a projection of consciousness. Like the power of consciousness is so immense. So imagine kind of being given like virtual reality glasses and being given the opportunity to see your body in front of you and to see like almost kind of light kind of coming through and creating the scene, if you will, of what you determine or what you call the world. To kind of get this experience of what it really is as consciousness. Like this is what's actually occurring. Science has proven this, and everyone from Bentinho, our pal Bentinho, is talking about it now, but many spiritual teachers have been saying this over and over and over again. How can we compel this? How can we convey this in an experiential way so that people walk out of this great awakening, immersive, theatrical experience with this feeling of like, holy shit, I've been duped, and I can create what I want. I can build something that's really right and aligned for me. Like that's possible. It's not only possible, but the entire universe is cheering me on. Like that's kind of what you want. Like I think that's possible through a kind of experiential theater piece like that. And it's just sort of appearing to me. I keep getting these images and jotting them down. And so my aim right now is just to be very loose with it. Let it show up, let it appear, make notes when needed, and just kind of have the intention to be open to receiving this and see what happens. There's a whole lot more I could say about it. You can tell by my energy.
Yeah, it's really
pretty
cool.
amped. It's pretty exciting.
It's really cool.
But it's the kind of thing where I think you could take it to big cities if funded properly. You could put some money into it, have investors, benefit from it, but take it right into the teeth of the environments where it's needed. New York City, Tokyo, London, Los Angeles, Rome, you name it. Like, have it be seen there for a month, have it be like something like, oh my God, this thing is coming to me, and have seekers, hungry, young people, old people, it doesn't matter, like people who are hungry for the truth, come and experience this and leave after, say, 2.5 hours, with their minds blown, completely transformed, and like, holy shit, completely on a new, different path, on a timeline that doesn't resemble the one they entered the space with.
Yeah, that was awesome. Every time we talk about this, it's this exciting. So I guess it's a pretty great pointer.
It's fun.
I guess the last thing is, which I think we said that was going to be the last thing, but we're also just kind of being here and interested in what we might create here in terms of, there's already a really vibrant community here. When we first came to Costa Rica, we were kind of interested in creating community. But what's interesting is that we found one that we think is like really vibrant, and so
super special.
We're kind of just open here to what we might create. We also have thought about ways to create an environment, whether it's a small community or just our home here, or get a piece of land and have a space that people can come to, where there is a higher frequency, where people can come and just be in that space and experience that. Sort of like a lot of thinking about the end of that theater piece, just like being in an environment that's attuned to a higher frequency, that anything is possible. And what is that like? And wanting to bring people into that environment. And it wouldn't just be us. Like, we've thought about, just expanding our circle, having a space here, a living space, a space to thrive, a space to challenge, a space to grow. And so that's just like kind of live and in action. And we, the home we have here is big enough for some friends to come to stay. We're interested in creating a field together, co-creating together. So if any of this kind of sounds exciting to you or interesting to you, I know some of you we've already talked to about this who are even on this live stream right now. So it's a really exciting time for us, and
totally.
These are just things we toss around every day, thinking about what we might, what we're going to do next, and what feels the most exciting and relevant and authentic.
Yeah, Costa Rica, us, or what we've just described calls to you, by all means reach out to us. Yeah, it's very loose. I mean, the people here are pretty amazing, and there's a lot that we have to learn from what's going on here. But friends or whatnot want to come experience this special place, we have extra space or can help you in whatever way you may want that. So, let us know.
So yes, if you're watching this now, and thanks for the comments that have been made already.
Yeah.
Maria, love your reflections. Like, it's just wonderful to see all these awesome creators on this call. But if if you're live on this now, or if you're listening to this later, and anything, if anything resonates or anything just seems exciting to you, we'd love your feedback on ARCs, on what seems exciting coming from us, and any ideas you have, or anything. We kind of wanted to put it out there to this community because we want your feedback. We want your thoughts and engagement.
Open.
So
wide open.
That's it. That's it for now.
It. All right. Thanks everyone for being with us. Really appreciate all the lovely comments, and we'll reach out again soon with more. Lots of love to all of you. Thanks.